Hi, I'm Peter Rowlett.
And I'm Katie Steckles. And Peter, what is today's mathematical object?
Today's mathematical object is a low bridge sign. And here to talk about this is Adam. Welcome, Adam.
Hello, Peter. Hello, Katie. Yes, this is a low bridge sign. It is a disc. It's about 12 inches in diameter. I have it right here. It sounds a little bit like this That's one for your ASMR channel. It's retroreflective, which is very cool. I don't know whether you've ever spoken about retroreflectiveness on your podcast. Very, very cool stuff. Very nice geometry. But that is not the property that I've come to talk about. It has a red ring around the outside. There is some text in the middle. I will tell you what the text is at the end. But the reason I'm talking about this sign... So I used to live in London, and as I was wandering up to Sainsbury's, I used to pass under two low bridges. So this is up in Camden, so there's quite a lot of low bridges. And the first bridge that I passed under was signed with one of these signs, 4.1 metres, 13 foot 6. So I'll say that's 4.1 metres, 13 foot 6. And then the next bridge that I had to walk under was also 4.1 metres, but that was 13 foot 3. And I always thought this was like a nice curiosity. You know, you sort of, in the way that you entertain yourself that when you're walking up to the supermarkets.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, for any non-British listeners, this is like an actual road sign, like a proper standard UK road sign. So when you have a low bridge and you want to make sure no one's going to drive under it, you put the height of the bridge. So like if you know how tall your vehicle is, I mean, I don't. Whenever I'm driving a vehicle and I see a thing and I'm like, oh, it's as long as I'm less than that, I'm okay. Who knows how tall their vehicle is? I have no idea. But it puts it in, because we have the wonderful combination of units. The standard units in the UK are all units. So we have both metric and imperial measurements given. But you're saying, so it was the same height in metres on both bridges, but the feet was different by 3 inches.
That's right, yes. So, as you say, signed in both metric and imperial, as it's been since 1994. And you're right, so the metric is the same, but the imperial is different. And
Wait, hold on. When did we get metric? That was in the 70s.
That's right. But
so what did they do between then and 1994?
Right, so... I can tell you. So it was feet and inches only up until 1981. So until then, you'd have the sign, but it would be in feet and inches. And after 1981, then you could, if you wanted to, you could have, the feet and inches and the metric on separate signs. If you wanted, it had to be separate signs. Now, they didn't tell you. The road traffic guidebook did not tell you how to write metric. They just told you that you could do it. And then since 1994, you've been able to put both on the same sign. Right. So now the circles and the triangles since 2016 have been able to have both the metric and imperial on the same sign. All right. So this is it sort of looks sort of aesthetic, and your sign has to be bigger to accommodate this. And Katie's right. Every time you drive under it, it's confusing. If you're in, typically a vehicle that you haven't driven for a while, right? Because, that's most of our experiences of driving large vehicles is, you're doing something for someone else.
Yeah, I guess a lot of people, if you're professionally driving a lorry, you know how big it is. Yeah. So if my vehicle, I know for sure that my vehicle is 13 foot 4, what do I do?
Terrifying, right? Absolutely yes. Terrifying. All right, so I thought this was odd, and then I was visiting friends in Birmingham, and I came across another bridge which was still 4.1 metres, but this time it wasn't 13 foot 3 or 13 foot 6, it was 13 foot 9. And at this point, I was like, right, okay, so something's up here, because, I can believe some sort of like mistake or some rounding type of thing before, right? But what exactly is going on? And you're right to be concerned, because 4.1 metres is not 13 foot 3, it's not 13 foot 6 or 13 foot 9. No, it is in fact 13 foot 5.
There must be a canonical answer to that question, right? It's not going to be a whole number of inches, but there is a definite answer.
Right. Okay. So I looked into this.
So did you initially think it was just a mistake? Like somebody's done this calculation each time and has slightly got it wrong? I mean,
my guess was rounding, right? Because, quite clearly, the metric is to 1 decimal place. And if you drive around the UK, you'll see that the metric signs are always to 1 decimal place. That seemed reasonable. It was less obvious to me what the deal with the feet and inches was. But to me, it felt like it was probably some sort of rounding thing. But when it was out, by 6 inches, I was like, no, okay, there's definitely something else going on here.
Yeah, because like 0.1 meters is like 3 or 4 inches, right? It's not. As a young person, I don't know exactly because I just think in centimeters.
It's
but
4
it's
inches.
Some inches. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
That's right. So I looked into this in the way that every curious mathematician might. And there was quite a good amount of information on this because it turns out that the road sign community, of which it exists and is quite prolific, there is a lot of nice stuff in this. Road sign Twitter most of Twitter is bad now, but road sign Twitter is still good.
Right. I mean, who'd have thought that there's a whole community of people enthusiastic about road signage and that they're also probably quite mathematical in the way they approach this, right?
Who'd have thought?
Yeah.
So I went and took a look, and it turns out that, as you would expect for big engineering type things, the instructions are all laid out. So they're in the Traffic Signs Manual, Chapter 4, and you can go online and you can find this, and it tells you exactly, if you have a bridge or a tunnel, it tells you exactly how you can sign it. The method's very straightforward. You go to your bridge, you measure it in meters, right? So you get your meter tape out and you measure it. You then, whatever that measurement is, you subtract 8 centimeters and then you round down to a multiple of 10 centimeters. Okay? So if it's, 4.25 or something, so you got 4.25, that's the actual height. You subtract off 8 centimeters, so that's like 4.17, and then you round down, so you get 4.1. That's what you're left with.
And so the 8 centimeters, is that because there might be a bit of bump in the road or something? Is that sort of you're erring on the side of caution?
You are absolutely erring on the side of caution, and in both of those cases, you are, of course. So you're rounding down to nearest 10. That's for caution. And indeed, the 8 centimetres is to deal with for safety, right?
Yeah, because I guess if something's like 1 centimetre more than the nearest multiple of 10, then that rounding down isn't going to do much at all. So, yeah, you need something that will take it down by at least that much.
Yeah, but that's good to know, right? So there could, in fact, be 18 centimetres difference at most, which is nice. So that's the metric part, right? But then the instructions are very clear. You have to go and you have to measure it again. You can't convert. You have to take out your imperial tape measure and you measure it again. And this time you measure it in feet and inches. This time you, for safety, subtract off 3 inches. So that's almost 8 centimetres, right? So that's almost the same.
Yeah, near enough.
Yeah, so you subtract off 3 inches and you round down to a multiple of 3 inches.
Yeah. Right.
So that's why they ended in, something for 3, something for 6, 9, or 0. So that explained why there was like a 13'3" and a 13'6", because and a 9, because that's the rounding. So that makes sense.
And that's because you're rounding down by 3 and then to a multiple of 3, and that's because 3 inches is 8 centimetres and also 3 inches is 10 centimetres, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And as you will have noticed, this is not quite the same, and this is the reason that 4.1 metres can be 13'3", 6, and 9.
Yeah. So that's almost like a fun puzzle. It's like, what is the exact value of the height of this bridge?
Right.
Such that you get 4.1 in every time with the metric method and, all of these different values.
Okay, so yes, of course, that is the exact puzzle. And as soon as I realised that this would be the case, I was like, okay, so you're right, this is the game we should be able to play, right? There is more information on this sign than we originally thought. In fact, we could be extremely precise about the range of heights for particular bridges. Right, so the way that you might work this out there, so we've got the algorithm, right? Is we can just try all of the heights. So we can try, going from 4 metres up to 5 metres in like 1 millimetre bits. And we can work out in every case, well, what should it say for feet and inches and what should it say for metres? And you can plot that on a graph. And then you're looking for sort of unique pairs of these things. It turns out that between 4 metres and 5 metres, there are in fact 21 unique combinations.
Should we try and describe this? You've got the actual height goes up, let's say, continuously, or more or less
Planck lengths, but yeah, okay.
Yes, but then the other two the sign in meters and the sign in feet are going up as a sort of step, but they're not the same step. They're kind of two overlapping staircases, I guess, kind of irregular.
Yeah, because when you get to a thing that you would round down to, you don't round it, so that kind of jumps vertically at that point, and those are multiples of 10 centimeters and also multiples of 3 inches, which is not the same thing.
So that means that you've got two sets of two staircases basically that are both regular size steps, but they're not the same size step, and that means that within a feet 3-inch step you can cross across a couple of different of the meter steps, I suppose.
Absolutely right, because the meter steps are wider than the feet and inches steps, because the meter steps are steps of 10 centimetres, whereas the feet and inches ones are 3 inches, which are smaller, which is exactly why you can end up with, as you say, Peter, 1 metre sign giving you 3 and different.
It's because the one that you spotted is 4.1 metres, which has those 3 different values, and it's really borderline. Like, it's very much the very ends of the range that give you the different feet values. And it looks like there's maybe a couple of other values where this happens as well. I guess we can put a link on the podcast to something where people can see this graph, because this is, I mean, obviously what people are here for. But we chose to do this as a podcast, so everyone could deal with us describing a graph for now.
Quite right. Yes. So 3.8 meters also has 3 different ones, as does 3.5 and 2.5 as well. Surprisingly, not very regular, but that's how it is. So this was nice, and indeed, so
job done, right?
Yeah, job done.
You've understood the problem. Everyone can go home happy.
Okay, but from a completionist sort of perspective, I thought, well, some of these therefore must be much rarer than other ones, right? Because there are some where these 2 steps of these ladders on this graph coincide for quite a lot of time. So that middle one that I said, 4.1 13'6", is pretty common. There's a big range of sizes, almost sort of 6 centimeters.
Yeah, are we assuming that like the heights of bridges in the UK must be presumably normally distributed? Because it just depends on like the bricks that they built them out of at the time and the road. I
mean, it seems right, and the
that.
tarmac, and then every time they resurface a bridge or resurface underneath it, it changes in some way, and then safety regulations change.
So we're saying that the 13'6" version of the 4.1 metre bridge is quite common, but in some ways you're quite lucky to have spotted the other 2 because they're much rarer.
That is absolutely right. So if you want, you can take a look at this, and indeed you can look at the numbers. So right, the 13'6", that's valid for almost a 7 centimetre range. It's quite a big range. Whereas you would only expect to get like the 13'3" version for a 10 millimetre range, so for a 1 centimetre range. So if you see a 4.1 13'3", there is extra information there. It tells you it's actually 4.18 something. That's good to know. But you're right, job done, surely. Well, sort of almost, because having decided that, having worked out that there were 21 unique combinations between 4 and 5, you're like, well, how many are there in total then, right? So typically you don't see any signs more than 5. You only have to sign a bridge if it's less than 5 meters. And I thought, well, let's go down to like 2 meters. That seems like a reasonable amount. And so in between 2 and 5 meters, there are 65 possible combinations.
I was going to say, like, who's signing a 2 meter bridge? Like, I could walk under that, and then realise there are probably people on this podcast that maybe could.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I don't know how tall
Right.
Peter is.
Yeah.
Peter is quite tall. It's hard to tell from the podcast, but I know I'm 1 meter 65.
It depends to what extent we've rounded down to get to the 2 meters.
Well, true,
but
yeah.
definitely.
What are you in feet and inches?
That does sound like a ducking situation to me.
Yeah.
So having found these 65, I was like, so in theory, they exist. I consider this a proof of uniqueness, but what about a proof of existence? That's the real challenge here. And so, I mean, I did the first thing that sort of comes to mind when you have these sorts of questions, which is like, okay, how am I going to find out whether these bridges actually exist? Well, I went to the group of people who really care about the heights of bridges, which is truckers.
Yeah.
Right? So people who are driving lorries,
Yeah.
they really care. And so I went to Smith's and I bought myself a Truckers Atlas, which is a massive map of the UK, massive thick thing.
Did you get a big bar of dairy milk for £1 while you were there? Sorry, that's a very British
if
reference.
only.
If you ever go to WH Smith's, you now can't avoid buying a giant dairy milk for £1. Carry on.
No, did you describe it as a niche reference?
It's just
it's
a
just
very
like
British,
everyone's.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a universal British
Yeah,
experience,
yeah.
I would say. No, so I also picked up my copy of Modern Railways magazine, but mostly I was there for the Truckers Atlas. And so the massive thing. So it's got all of the bridge heights in the UK. And so I sat down and opened page 1. And I was like, right, we've got to go through this, right? But then you see there's a problem because the Atlas only has the heights in feet and inches. And this is slightly awkward because obviously the whole point is to try and find combinations. So it's okay. I loaded up Google Street View and then spent the next month going through all the pages of this atlas, trying to find, starting near where I was, and trying to find combinations that I thought might exist. And of course, Google Street View is quite good for this, but you have to be a little bit careful because sometimes the photos are a little bit out of date, and if they resurface the roads, these things sort of change. But nonetheless, that's fine. I went about, and by the end of these sort of couple of months, I was pretty confident that actually I could find in the country an example of all of these.
Oh, that's nice.
So I had
that's
which
pleasing,
is nice. So I had
yeah.
It's very pleasing, right? So I had a nice map of the UK which I made, and I sort of put it up on my website, so I was able to sort of track my progress. I was like, right, so here I reckon are all the ones that probably could exist. And so to give you a sense of where they might be, of course, I was biased towards places where I was currently living. So there's a whole bunch around London, but which you would expect because often, particularly for the low heights, you're looking for railway bridges or old railway bridges as well, right, where there wouldn't have been that much clearance for cars. And so you want places with a good established tradition of railways. So London's good. Birmingham was really good as well. So quite a lot around there.
I'm sort of thinking about this and like, why would it be railways? But no, that is the thing that's going over the bridge, right? That's the reason why there's a bridge. I just forget that there's no people don't just build a bridge just to have a nice bridge. I guess, it could be a road going over a road, but that's, I think, reasonably rare compared to railway bridges.
I agree. So that's basically where I found them. There's a bunch sort of down towards the southwest of England as well. A couple up in Scotland, but mostly that's sort of where I thought everything would be. And to be fair, this is also a reflection of where the latest Google Street View information is. Because out in the out in the countryside in Wales somewhere, you might have a picture from 12 years ago. And as I mentioned, you only get dual unit triangles since 2016. And if you're out in the countryside and your picture is from 2012, you're not going to get a dual unit triangle. And so it's not going to be any good. So I now have this nice map, and I was like, right, I think therefore they probably all exist. But at this point, I suspect you might be thinking he's talking about triangles, but he definitely said circles at the beginning of this recording, right? I was definitely talking about a sign that was a circle. So you might be interested to know that we have both circles and triangles here in the UK. So drivers here will have seen both of these things, which is very unusual. So in Europe, it's nearly all circles.
They have like specific meanings, right? Because like a circle is meant to indicate, I guess like a prohibition, like a thing you're not meant to do. Like for
example, drive into a bridge.
Yeah, no driving into this bridge in a toll truck. And then a triangle is more like a warning.
That's right. Yes. So I agree. So typically, therefore, in Europe you get circles. In the US you get diamonds, which are the equivalents of triangles. And in Ireland as well.
This is sort of both, right? It's both a warning and a thing you're not meant to do.
Right.
Yeah, I'm trying to think because it's like you get a circle for don't drive in this bus lane or whatever, and then you get a triangle for
badges. Obviously,
I was going to say deer crossing or something like this.
Do we need like a Rowlett triangle, like a rounded triangle shape to indicate both?
Excellent question. And of course the triangle is already slightly rounded, but yes, I agree. It would be nice if it was. Okay, let's pose that to Roadside Twitter, see what they think.
Yeah.
But what's happening here? Are you warning that there's a low bridge, or are you prohibiting tall things from going under?
Right, yes. So, for some reason, the UK is the only country who has deemed it necessary to separate out the somewhat edge case of an arch bridge. So we have quite a few arch bridges, right? You know, the classic shape of a bridge. Bridges can be flat, right, to drive under, or they can be arched. And you see, with an arch bridge, in theory, if you're very thin, you can be quite tall. Right. Whereas typically, if you're a car or a lorry or something, right, then you're relatively wide, and so you can't go through. And so there is therefore technically a distinction between you are not allowed to go through this bridge versus you shouldn't go through this bridge unless you can actually make it.
If you're a penny farthing with a top hat on, you'll probably be all right.
Exactly,
no
yes.
buses. Yeah.
That's raised an interesting question for me. So if you're measuring the height of an arch bridge, are you measuring it right in the middle?
No. If they've signed this correctly, you will see that where you've got the triangle on the arch bridge telling you the height, there will be little braces that come out the side. They come out left and right, and then they go down to 2 points on the arch bridge. And so they will point at the exact height on the arch bridge where they have measured the height from. What this means is that you can end up with very low bridges, and the lowest bridges that are signed are arch bridges where they've just gone very wide.
Yeah. Well, you occasionally see ones where they say, if you're in a tall vehicle, go in the middle.
Yes.
And like they like mark it on the road, and they say, if anyone's coming the other way, just wait, because this tall vehicle's going to need to go right in the centre of the road.
Exactly. So for some reason, we have this distinction because, I mean, you could put a triangle on it, right? And then, like they do in the US with their diamonds, right? And then if someone crashes into the bridge, well, you can still prosecute them for driving them into a bridge, right? Like that seems reasonable. Except turns out that is just harder than prosecuting people for disobeying the sign. The whole reason we have circles,
Okay.
The whole reason we have circles in the first place is because it is easier to prosecute someone for disobeying a sign than it is for driving into a bridge.
That's so good.
Right, it was only triangles until 1975 when people realised, let's just prosecute them this way instead. And that's the entire reason we have this mess, is for some nonsense legal
Amazing.
reason.
So if you make a sign that says something, if you make it a circle, does it then suddenly become a law that you can...
Right. Okay, so you used to have a traffic regulation order associated with it. And this was a bit of a faff, to be fair. So this is why you still see triangles on flat bridges as well. So typically these days you have circles on flat bridges, because on a flat bridge, you definitely can't get under it, right? That's an absolute restriction. Yeah, until 1994 you needed this extra order, which is a bit of a faff to implement. But once you had it, it was fine. You could prosecute people for, driving in a bus lane in the same way. So now we know. So we have circles and triangles.
It's just a mix. It's just like whatever it happens to be on that bridge.
Basically, yeah. As people will find if they drive around Britain, you will typically find that flat bridges now have circles and arch bridges typically have triangles. It's not a perfect rule, but that's typically the rule.
I just love that you know that now. Like that's a fact you never thought you were going to find out.
So now you've opened up the possibility of 65 of each, I guess.
Yes, which is dangerous. And I have not tried to work this out, although, of course, it's in the back of my mind. I felt like, first, proof of concept. Let's just check that the heights exist in the first place, because some are really rare, and there are a bunch of cases where I think there's probably only one example of this particular bridge of this particular height combination on the British road network. So, 65 of them, but then sort of between 2020 and 2021, I had quite a bit of spare time on my hands.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And
you just decided to take a break from everything. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I thought, what can I do which doesn't involve me mixing with other people, is quite outdoorsy, and would be safe and would contribute to this important project.
Yeah, I mean, we use this time to take the podcast that we'd recorded in a spare classroom at Sheffield Hallam University and bring it online, bring in guests, and get some people in who we might not have been able to drag to Sheffield for a podcast recording. That's what we did with our our ability to do things a bit differently in 2020.
Yeah, right. So something for everyone. And
so did you literally go to all 65 of the? Did you?
So
did you actually do this?
So yes, yes. I drove around the entirety of the UK, confirming for sure that these signs do in fact exist in all of these locations. I can share the link to the map so you can see them for yourself.
For the benefit of anyone listening to a podcast in audio form, I am shaking my head right now. You can see it's kind of disapproval, but also respect. That's the face I'm giving off here.
I think it's important to commit to the bit.
Yeah.
Right. Once you've had this idea, you've got to go ahead and do it. So I drove around finding all of them, trying to find all of them. I guess they eventually sort of found them all. I should say there are some nice, particularly low ones. If anyone's keen on finding particularly nice low combinations, so like there's quite a lot of 2-meter bridges or tunnels, like the Rotherhithe Tunnel in London's got 2 meters. Atherstone Station in Warwickshire's 2 meters, 6'9". If you want some really low ones, so this 65 that I've been talking about, that's from 2 to 5 meters. But if you want the lowest ones in the country, I've tried to find those as well. Again, one near you. So if you're in the sort of Bristol, Wales area, then Newport, South Wales, in Bishton, there's a 1.7 meters, 5'6", very low, very scary, proper flat bridge under a railway line. Very friendly person controlling there's also a level crossing there. I had to explain to the chap who's operating the level crossing, no, I don't want you to open the level crossing. The bridge is fine. I just need a picture of this bridge. So it's all good. If you're in London, then there's a 1.5 metre, 5-foot bridge. That's the Coppermill Lane Waterworks. So that's near Walthamstow. So you can go there. That's mostly for bikes. And then the lowest sign one in the country is north of Glasgow in Kirkintilloch. And that's 1.3 metres, 4'6". Now, this is an arch bridge and it's signed pretty low. So I was able to drive my Polo through it, no problem at all. But that is a nice example of what used to be a railway bridge going over the top. Now it's a nice path. But 1.3, 4'6" is the lowest in the country. And that's, I believe, and you can go there. Having said that I drove around to try all these 65, I admit that in one case I had a little bit of a problem, because even though I've tried all of the entries in the Truckers Atlas, and I went on there's a website called Sabre, which has a lot of information about roads, and I used some of their databases as well. When it came to actually finding one particular combination, I thought I had it, but then in real life it wasn't there. It had been changed recently, and so there was one missing combination. And so from the 65, in fact, I have only genuinely found in the wild 64. And the missing combination, so here is a plea to you listening. If you see a circle or a triangle with 2.2 metres, 7'0", 2.2 metres, 7'0", I believe you have found perhaps the only existence of this sign in the wild. Please let me know and get in touch with the podcast, and we will add this to the collection. 2.2 metres, 7'0". So I was gutted, right? I thought I had the whole set. There's one that's missing. It's absolutely, it's ruined. It's ruined the whole experiment. But let me tell you, Katie, Peter, all was not lost. Because what I was thinking about after I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do about this, is that I was wandering up to work. And this is sometimes how my mind works. Sometimes you sort of wander through areas and you're like, there's a sign up here, but it's rubbish quality. They must have just ordered some rubbish thing off the internet. And I was like, can you not just order them off the internet? So I went online to eBay, and turns out you can just order signs with any garbage you like written on them at all. And so the item that I am bringing to your podcast is a 2.2 metre, 7'0" height restriction sign, which now hangs on my shed in the garden and is my last piece of this ridiculous adventure.
That's so good. It's one of those objects that you kind of never normally get to hold in your hand.
Right.
You know, like road signs, you see them from a distance, you see the reflectiveness, you sort of have a sense of them as objects, but not in a kind of tactile close-up sense. And I just remember one time when I had to take a shortcut on a dual carriageway, and I ended up touching one of the, the black and white chevrons that indicate a sharp corner.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've never been this close to one before. It's like a weird wildlife experience with signage. But yeah, if you can literally just buy them off the internet, then you can just have one, and that's yeah.
So turns out this whole trip a complete waste of time, because I could have just bought them all off the internet anyway.
Yeah. Well, you need to also erect a bridge of the correct height, though. Surely.
This is true. So I did try to see whether the door to my shed was of the appropriate height. Not quite, but it's okay. Not all dreams can come true.
I mean, that is genuinely incredible, and I guess it kind of started from this mathematical sort of curiosity about why these signs give you different numbers, but also actually that's kind of interesting that they've picked this way of deriving the numbers that to anyone who cares about mathematical accuracy, it's just absolutely nonsense. But I guess it works.
Yeah, it totally works. It's safe. People still do hit bridges, but but it makes a lot of sense, right? And if you see how other countries do it, you can see that there is some sense in here. So in the US, they don't round to the nearest 3 inches, for example. You'll see sort of exact feet and inch conversions. They have some other method. So there is good logic in all of these things. And there's good logic in lots of these sort of rules from the traffic signs manual. A good piece of design and engineering from.
Yeah, somebody's really thought through what needs to happen. Yeah.
It's just nice to see that, right?
Or it's gone wrong enough times that they've iterated to the point where it is actually effective. You see a sign and you're like, that sign exists because someone did the opposite of what that sign says. Yeah.
Yeah. My one criticism is, I think, because we have this dual unit phenomenon, I think it is confusing. I think the numbers are smaller than they used to be. If you look at very old height signs, so they used to say clearance, they used to be white, black text on white. You can still see them in places that still have them knocking around, typically like old buildings with like fancy facades. So they look like that until, I guess, the War Boys report, so I guess it was the mid-60s. But there, the number was massive. Like, the clearance was huge. It was written massive text. And if I have one criticism, I think it's that, it's nice that it's on a triangle or a circle, but the text is quite small. And I feel like if there was just one unit, then the number would be big and it would be clearer. So...
Yeah. You're driving up to it and you're like, oh no, I've only memorised the height of my vehicle in feet and inches after unit conversion in my head while I'm driving.
Okay, so you're joking, right? But like inside these inside vehicles, it will, as you said earlier, it will often say the height of the vehicle, right? So you know the height of the vehicle, but often it will only do it in one of those heights, right? So
this is the world that we've created for ourselves. Is that this is the thing? Because Peter was saying, like, do people use the metric system has been around for much longer than this? But I believe that the metric system has been used for everything except height, and like people will still so often give their height in feet and inches, even though that's not the system that we officially use. And I guess heights of bridges and heights of people are, in the same kind of area. So
and roads are a minefield, aren't they? Because distances are in miles.
Oh God,
just don't think of distances in kilometers. I find it fascinating, this whole area. There's a bunch of stuff that you learn at school that you learn in metric, and there's a bunch of stuff that you learn at home. And because you're learning it from the previous generation, it just maintains feet and inches and stone and ounces and all these sorts of things, because they're kind of learned in that social way.
Yes, and you see this a lot with recipes as well, right? Sort of like you just like measured in terms of volumes of things that you just might have knocking around.
Right, thank you for that. That is fascinating and interesting, and we've enjoyed hearing that story. Where can people go to find out more about this, to find out more about you online? So
this exciting expedition is all documented at on my website. So that's adamtownsend.com/height hunt. So you can see all of the pictures, all of the maps, all of the information about the ridiculous way that we've ended up with this system. I've collected it all there, and indeed, if you can find the missing sign, then get in touch with me that way. 2.2 meters, 7'0". Thank you very much. So that's this project. I am one of the editors of Chalk Dust Magazine, which is a magazine for the mathematically curious. If you have an interesting thing that you'd like to write up for us, and surely you do because you've listened to enough of these podcasts by now, then please get in touch with your nice ideas. Both Peter and Katie have written for Chalk Dust before. We would very much appreciate you writing in with some of your ideas. We try to make them look pretty and share your stuff in a nice printed form as well as online with the world. So that's chalkdustmagazine.com. If you'd like copies of the magazine as well, we ship them at basically postage costs to anyone who wants them. And they have fun articles, puzzles, that sort of thing. And stuff that you should enjoy.
Excellent. And as someone who has both written for and read Chalk Dust Magazine, I can recommend it very much. It's very cool. Excellent. So the best place to find both me and Peter on the internet is at finitegroup.co.uk, which is our mathematical community. We've got a Discord and we do monthly live streams, and some of the episodes of this series of the podcast we recorded in that Discord channel, so people have been able to listen in.
And we both blog at aperiodical.com, which is where you can find more episodes of this podcast.
And if you have any suggestions or thoughts, or if you have found a, 2.2 metres, 7 foot sign somewhere in the UK, then you can drop us an email, objects@aperiodical.com.
The music is Funk Game Loop by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons.